Oh, come on, give me a break. Wait, is it up? That's really frustrating. I think it's there. Alright, cool, okay. I think it's there. Alright, cool, okay. Alright, awesome, okay. Sorry about that, guys. You know what? I bought a new laptop the other day. Perhaps I'll move to that for the next time. It's just because I haven't set everything up properly on it yet. But that might be for the best if this can continue doing this, and then I can investigate. I keep meaning to investigate that blue screen of death. It's such a pain in the ass when that kind of thing happens because it's so many things, so many variables. It could be memory, it could be the GPU, it could be the CPU. It's all new equipment as well. I've only had it about 5 months or so, 6 months. Anyway, we are where we are. Right. Let's see if this. So as well, whether it knackers files on its way down as well. Anyway, okay. Now, all right, segmentation fault. Are you with us? Let's just wait for seg fault. All right, cool. So before I was really interrupted by my blue screen of death, I don't actually know which bit. Okay, Dragon's Den in YouTube chat. I don't know what that means. That looks really shit quality. What's the quality of the stream like? Is it just me that's seeing it very barely readable? Is there a clarity on the stream? Can you read that? Is it just happened to be what I'm reading? Because it looks horrible to me. That's what I can see. Does it look as bad? Well, that's going to make it even worse because it'll be fuzziness on forced up fuzziness. It's fine. All right, cool. Right. Okay. It's clean. All right, good. Right, where were we? I was about to talk about properties. Let me get rid of my YouTube on my screen. That's confusing me. I was about to talk about properties, and I'm not sure how far. Maybe it's set to 40. Oh, you only seen 4? Is it really bad? OBS looks good. My OBS looks okay. There's no point showing you if it's bad. Oh, you mean on my side? Just to be clear, can you read all that text very clearly on your side? What's on the IDE at the moment? It's in your end. In your end. Okay, right, cool. I see. All right. So I was about to talk about properties and why that might be useful. Oh, I need to change that back first. So I think it probably crashed and took that change down with it. Yeah, it's lost a bit of change there, hasn't it? You can see that I have that further down. Anyway, doesn't matter. We'll fix it. So, as I said earlier, it's a very good idea to learn what the hotkeys are. It's a very good idea to use private for your variables in general. There are instances where you don't want to do that, and we'll come on to that. But before we get there, as I discussed earlier, keeping them private means that you are disallowing anything from monkeying around with the internals of whatever it is that you're dealing with, and you're making it much easier to maintain and much safer to maintain. General rule of thumb, keep everything private unless you need not to. Now, but in doing that, I've broken this code over here. I can't get to age now. So let me rename these again as well. Shall I? Yeah, I'll rename them just to keep to the code as it should be. So it's forgotten that as well. But I'll make sure I save it. I'm pretty sure I saved it. You know, it's interesting that you didn't remember that. Anyway. Okay. Now, this is still broken even though I'm putting these back to what they should have been when I put the prefix in of this naming convention here for Catherine's input, because probably want to word that conversation earlier. But it's a naming convention. Private variables should have an underscore. Statics should have a capitalized beginning, capitalized letter at the beginning. It's just a naming convention, right? And there are some developers who don't do that, and they might just use this. Now, back in the day in C++, you used to use something called Hungarian notation, which I won't bore you with, but basically that was thinking about it nowadays is quite onerous. There's not that many naming conventions and standards in C#, and it's good that it's giving me a pointer about where what's it more about there? Interesting, right? Oh, I wasn't sure about that one. Anyway, come back to that. I'm going off topic here a little bit. Just surprised at that one it gave me there. So the main thing that I'm talking about here is that I changed all these variables to private, and they were public previously. And the reason I wanted to change them to private is because I want to control what access to the internals of this class, because that might be used in all sorts of calculations and stuff. So what do I do in that instance? Because I've now broken this. Well, one thing that I could do is provide a public function like this. Like that. And now let's change that. I'm going to do it simply. Just copy and paste. Sorry. I don't want to do that. I wanted to stop the mutation of that, so we're going to get rid of that one. I'll come on to how we can address that if we do want to change that. So now I've got I've created a getter that gets the age, and effectively now what this is, external to this person class, this is a read-only variable. And I mean, let's say the other thing I wanted to do, if even rather than having a public variable, even if I wanted something to be able to mutate, to modify that value, I might do this. Like that, right? And then come back to how all this was earlier. I don't know why it suggested 10 there. That's AI picking that. Anyway, right, whatever. Okay, so now what I've done is I've created a public getter and a public getter and a public setter. Yeah, I'm coming on to that. I'm coming on to what you're talking about there, segmentation for. So I can now control, without giving them direct access to the variable, what they're allowed to do. And let's say, for example, now I've got it in a function, I can do some validation. So let's say that I want them to be able to modify the age, but I don't want them to put people in that are more than 100 years old. So what I could do is if n is less than 100, whatever, right? Let's do it properly, because I don't really want to take shortcuts while I'm teaching. Like that. So by pointing behind a function, you have to go great stream. Okay, cool, man. Well, the VODs will be there later as well. The video on demand's not like Twitch, they'll just be up there. I don't need to upload them, so it's nicer doing it in Visual Studio. Anyway, thanks for joining us, man. I'll catch you next time, hopefully. Right, so what I've got there is now putting it behind a function, I can control what happens rather than just giving it direct access before. And I could do underscore age equals whatever, like I did there previously. I've now put a gate around it. I've now put a gate that allows me to do some validation. So it's always a good idea not to give, in general, there are some exceptions, not to give public access to a variable directly. Instead, what you want to do is provide some functions. But look how much code I've had to write there. That's a pain in the ass, right? I don't want to have to do all that every single time. Let's say I've got 30 variables on here, and I want some of them to be read-only. I want some of them to be writable. There must be a way of not having to write all this code. Well, there is. For a start, there are tertiary ways of writing these functions. And just for very quick, we'll come on to these shorthands later, but it's not really the purpose not really the ultimate purpose what I'm going to show. But you could also do this. Like that, and these are called is it lambdas in this? I think they're called lambdas in here. If I get the right terminology right, the lambdas in this context. But basically, they're like shorthand functions. But I'm still having to write one of these for every single variable. I don't really want to have to do that. Wouldn't it be nice if I could have a kind of property that automatically creates me these getter and setters? If I had some bit of magic that I could associate with person with an age variable, and it writes these, it creates a getter and setter for me automatically. Turns out there is. And we'll use an example. What should we use for this? Well, we'll define a different variable so that these are there for reference. In fact, let me get rid of that shorthand, so I don't really want to go into that. Let's go back to how it was before. I don't want to confuse you with that shorthand there. But let's add a IQ. Right. So what I've done now is actually that's not a very good name. Let's think of a better name. Let's think of something better. What should we use? I don't know. Size. Whatever. Right. Okay. So. Oh, it's not going to default value yet. Right. So now, implicitly, I have a variable that's associated just in the same way that these are, and this implicitly provides the equivalent of a getter and the equivalent of a setter just by me putting get set there. So now I've got a variable with some functions to define for me. So I don't need to define these by hand. And what I can do in here now like that. And that calls a getter in here. And I can even provide my own implementations of what that getter does. And I'll do that for an equivalent of what I did within set age, where I wanted to put a gate around it to say, well, I'm only allowing shoe sizes or ages of a certain constraint or whatever, or I don't want, if I want to modify something, or I want something else to trigger, if I want to change the functionality of what happens when something gets set, I can still use properties. And now what I can do in here is oops. What the hell is it doing it for? Pressing OK. What am I? I'm thinking my size 11 in UK. There we go, like that. And it allows me to do that. So I've implicitly got a getter and a setter there. So in C# you will see a lot of these. This is called properties. If you see this thing when it's get set at the end, that's called a property. It's return type, it's variable type. This is equivalent of this, but with these functions added. So it very, very quickly, in a very nice terse way, allows you to set these. I don't know if there is an equivalent of this in C#. Sorry, in JavaScript, because it's Java put my teeth in. I don't know if there's equivalent of this in Java, because it's been a long time since I looked at Java. But I suspect there will be something similar. C# has a lot of nice features that make it easier to do stuff, quicker to do stuff. I don't want to have to create a get function and a set function like I'd have to do after doing it in C++ every single time. It's nice, I can just have shoe size there. Now let's assume that I wanted to imply some rules about how the set works. I could do something like this. Let's say I only wanted to set let's say I want allowing really big shoes, right? I don't know, class as a big shoe. I could do something like this. And that is equivalent to what I did there for age, set age. What return means. Can I explain what return means? Oh, absolutely I can. Yes, let's come on to that. Okay, so return. So with a function, let me just make sure I give clarity about what I did there first. Why is that? Okay, there we go. I just want to make sure there's no typos before I move on. Why is that bitching at me? Oh, it's a style thing. I'm not going to worry about that. The code is right. Let me just build that, make sure that works. No, it doesn't. Okay. Oh yeah, because I broke it here, didn't I? Let me move that over there. And which one of you can tell me why that's broken now? Why isn't it like that? It's saying person does not contain definition for underscore name and no accessible extension method, blah 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 blah. So it doesn't like name. It's giving the same error for age. Because there's a delay, and not to hold things up, the reason for that is because I've now made it private. And so only things within this class, within person, can see it. And that's not within this class. This is in main in a completely different project. So that's why I'm going to rim it out for now. Right, so what does return do? Well, the simplest example is this one here. Return basically means, when you put return on a function, have you not done this already, Boomtrout, in Unity? Was it you that said you did Unity? Return basically is the return function from a. You can have one return value from a function. So you've got two possibilities in a function. You can either return nothing, which is known as void, or you can return some variable of some description. That could be a list, it could be a class, object instance, it could be any number of things. In this particular instance, I want to return an integer that represents my age. So return basically says the return value from this function is an int and it's going to be age. And I used it here. So I did a console write line which printed out martin.getAge. So that would, in that instance, because age is set to 53 there when this thing's created, when I call console.writeline martin.getAge, it's going to call this function. This function returns an int, and that int happens to be, based on that return value, is age, which will be set to 53. So this is going to print 53. Basically where I'm at Unity. Okay, right, cool. All right, fair enough. So yeah, return is the one return value that you return from your function. In this instance, I'm returning an integer. I could have, let's do one fun name as well. Make it a bit clearer. Oh, it's even suggesting it for me. Here we go. So this says return, and basically it means the return value. The return value. So anything that calls this can use that. So now I could do. Let me get another variable, right? All right. So now what I've done is said, right, I'm going to create another variable called name, and I'm going to assign that with whatever martin.getName returns. Martin.getName returns name. I could do anything I wanted here. I could return whatever I wanted from that function. But return is the one return parameter. There are other ways you can adjust data, because you can have references and stuff like that you can reference variables that you pass to parameters to functions. Have we done any parameters to functions? Yes, we've got one there, haven't we? But I'll come on to that later. But basically return means this is the return value from that function. what it's going to return, what it yields, its answer. Now, interestingly, or appropriately, I should say, set age is a mutator. That is going to set the age to whatever I do as the input variable there. Did I actually use that anywhere? Let me move that. Oh yeah, I did there. Look, set age 23. So when I call set age.23, it looks at the instance of trout and it will end up calling this function. And it'll go if n is less than 103, which it is because it's 23. You'll set n age that's associated with trout to that variable there. And this doesn't need a return value because it's a setter. So we don't need to worry about return value there, which is why it's void. So void in this context, from the point of view of a function return type, indicates I don't want to return anything. Not interested in the results. There are no results other than what happens inside the function. So yeah, so your return types always go at the beginning of your function like that. After the keywords like public and static, which we've already been through, you would put an int there. It could be whatever the variable is, double, whatever it is. It could be a list. It could be any number of complex types. You can return objects. I can return more people, persons, whatever you want from there. Whatever you decide to return, that always goes at the front of that there. Does that make sense? So yeah, return. That is your return value. The one return value from that function. I mean, there's nothing to stop me returning stuff. I could return something from there. I could call set age and then go return age like that. But that wouldn't be the expectation for that. You're trying to do a set there. You don't really necessarily. You're not going to call something like this. That doesn't look readable, does it? That int age equals trout.set age 23. It doesn't really make as much sense, that. So that's why that would be void. It makes sense before I've given you and explained it. Okay, so that means I haven't explained it perhaps as well as I could have done. Your return value is you can have one return value from a function. You can return whatever you like. And the return is the keyword that dictates what that value will be. So in that instance, I was returning the age. Well, where is a better instance? That instance, I was just returning the age that's associated with this member. Now, if you remember again, just so we're clear, let me get rid of that. Remember back to our conversation about statics. Not look at this one here. All these are member functions, so they have access to the internal state, even though it's private. This is the state that's associated with an instance of person. So trout has got an integer and a string associated with it, the age and name. And when I call get age, like I didn't do it. And let's do it on you as well. Like that. Oops. When I call that, it calls get age on as a member variable that has access. Sorry, as a member function. This one, which has access to the member variables. And all I'm interested in this particular instance is knowing what that value is. So I return the age like that. Right. Is there any more? If there's any more clarity needed on that, you can ask me after this stream, and I'll knock up some more examples that might make it make more sense. Right. So where was I? We were talking about properties. So yeah. So if you remember going back to my age, I wrote all these functions. Let's move that one up a bit so it's closer. What might be useful actually, Boomtrout, is if you could show me some code that you're using return in Unity, and I can give you an example that's more pertinent to your particular scenario. But yeah, we'll come back to that. Right, so coming back to my properties, I've got I didn't want to have to write get age and set age for every private variable I've got. So what I can do is I can do a getter. I can provide a property with a getter and a setter that gets implicitly defined. And I'm going to go back to the simpler example here for now. just to show you how terse this looks. I've now got a getter and a setter, which allows me to do that. And it allows me to do that there. So it implicitly knows it's doing a get based on context. So in that one, it would call the getter. On that one, because I'm assigning it a value, it calls the setter. And the default behavior will be to set a hidden variable, effectively. It's shoe size, I don't know, whatever it calls it internally, it doesn't really matter to you. But there will be a variable that's backing that property. That's called a property because of that get set stuff there. That's a property. But ultimately, it's just the same as a private member variable. Oh, sorry, it's just the same as a member variable, except that it has getters and setters. It has these functions. It has a function built in that means you don't have to write one in the general case. Sometimes you want to change how that setter works. But that's the essence of it. That's a property. So that's a property. And now what I've done is I've created although it's public, it's a public property there. But I can still control what it does. And the other thing I could do is I can make it so that you can only set it internally by making that a private set. So now only things that are inside this class can call shoe size equals whatever. And now you can see that that's broken. So let's put that back. Does that make sense so far? So properties are really a convenience, right? When you see this kind of get set type stuff, it's just a convenience. It's the equivalent of having a variable and some functions that are designed, developed by, implemented by the language for you. Okay, right. Let's think where to go next. Just bear with me a sec. Oh, I lost my little, because everything's shut down, I lost my context. Just bear with me again, I forgot what I was going to do next. Are we going to be ready for this, actually? I was talking with, I think it was you I was talking about this with earlier on, Kathleen. I don't know if you're still online. But I created a bit of functionality to pass around variables on different types of languages. One was in C, one was in C++, and one was in C#. Are we ready for this? I think we might be. I also created, just bear with me a sec, let me just review this. There's something else I was going to define, I was going to talk about. That was it. Was it in there? Where did I write it? Okay, no, that's I don't want to go in there yet. That's way too advanced. Doesn't help when I lose context just because the bloody machine decides to blue screen on me. Can't remember what I was going to do next. I've lost that bit of code that I had some documentation. Oh, you know what it is. I've got it in Discord. There's something else I wanted to cover. Just bear with me a sec. All right. A simple class library. We've done that. Public and private APIs. We've done that. And moved on to static. Okay. Right, so I think we covered pretty much everything that we did last week. We know about how to create references, project references, and also package references so that we can talk to other packages. We know that we can create a class, and a class can have static functions which don't have access to private member variables, but we can also create member functions which have access to some state that we can associate with an instance of whatever that class is. And in this example here, we create two instances of this class. one of them associated with a variable called Martin, one of them associated with a variable called Trout, and each one of those has got its own copies of these variables, and we did some getters and setters on them, and then we wrote a property that allows us to implicitly call get, which I've not, that one there, and one that allows us to call set. Right, now let's think where I could go next. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about passing parameter functions. That's probably where to go next, because it sort of leads into something that I was going through with Cat earlier. Have we done any of that yet? Let's complicate this in a way that's going to be transparent and not too overbearing. I wonder if it's time to start looking at lists. It just stresses again. Okay, let's talk about variables that you pass in and out of functions. Now we talked about, and this is related to return. Let's say I had another function in here. What should I call it? Adjust. And I'll stick with ints for now, just because they're the easiest. Right, let's do that. So now, let's assume, and this doesn't necessarily need to be a member, although I've made it a member variable. But now I can go like this. And then let's say I've got a variable here, int n equals 42, and I pass n into there. And then let's say I want to see what that is. Now, if you're not aware, plus basically just means add one to it, right? So what we're doing in here, I've got a function called adjust parameter. I'm calling it because it's it's not a static, it's a member variable. It has access to these, so it needs to be called on a particular object. Although in theory, I could have created this static because it's not accessing any of these member variables. But in this instance, it's just incrementing the parameter, the integer that I pass in. So you would expect, when I print this, for it to be 43, right? But let's get rid of these other console prints, just so that we can... How the fuck I type? Oh, that's the other thing I wanted to do. I didn't talk about breakpoints yet. I did cover that last week. I'll go over that quickly. I'm not sure if you've seen that. If you haven't, this is something you definitely need to know about. But this will be a good time to talk about that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set a breakpoint there by clicking on that little thing there. You can also do it, press F9. Now what that means is I can debug into this rather than just letting it run. And it will stop when it hits a breakpoint. So it's going to run my program. And the way it knows which program to run is because you it might not let me do it now, so I just started it. But you can effectively, in fact, let's do it again properly. So I can effectively do set a startup project. It'll say somewhere. In Visual Studio it does. Where does it do it in this one? Oh, there you go. It's up there. That tells it which program to actually run, and the reason it doesn't show the library, Bitman's lib, is because that's a library rather than an executable app there. So if I had another console app, I'd see them both there, but there's only one, so it knows that's one. When I start this, when I try and debug it, I click on that little debug thing there. It's going to run this app. So I'm going to run that again. So I was looking at my other screen for a second. Has it stopped? Okay, yeah, it stopped. Right, so I run this through the debugger by clicking that button now. I've now got a slightly different menu, set of toolbars. But now what I can do is I can look at these variables. I can hover over them, so I can see that my shoe size is associated with 11. I can look at all the variables on Martin there, which is a person, and got a shoe size 11. It's got an age of 53. It's got a name of Martin, and it shows them down there as well. Now, I can step into or over these functions somewhere in the menu. I think it's down here on the left. Don't know why I didn't have it up down the right, but anyway. So I think I get used to the hotkeys. I'm going to use the hotkeys from now on, but you can get to them all from down there. What I'm going to be effectively doing is stepping over, and that means step over that function. And you can also step in, which means it will actually step the debugger inside that function, but I'm going to step over for now. Now, what you would expected, given that we saw that this should do an n++, is n should have been 43. But it's not, it's 42. Why is that? Well, the reason being is to do with the different types that you can have in C#. You can have what's called reference types, and you can have value types. And this is a value type. So effectively, it's taking a copy of that integer. What we want is to be able to modify that value type itself, and the way that you do that, if I stop this again, don't stop it yet, is by using the, and it's rare you need to do this actually, because you normally do this all via the return value, but you can modify the input parameters to your functions as well, which is what this is about. It's not, oh God, it's that long since I've done this bit. Bear with me a sec. Oh, it's just ref, that's it. So what this says is, I actually want a reference to that integer rather than a copy of that as a value type, because that is a value type. An integer, your things like your ints and your floats and your doubles, all that kind of stuff, they are all what's called value types. Your reference types are things like these classes which I've created here. So now what I'm going to do is I want to be able to adjust n, this integer here. And I'm going to have to tell this. This is really just the semantics of how C# works. Did it again, didn't I? There. So now if I run that again, I'm telling it that this is just parameter. It needs not just an integer, it needs a reference to an integer. You can take a reference to an integer, it means you can be able to modify it. So if I run this again through the debugger, I'm going to single step again, step over, and now n is 43, and if I print that, where's my output? 43, there you go. So that is what's called passing by reference. So you can pass value types by reference. An integer, a float, double, that kind of thing. Pass it by reference means that you can modify them such that the modification is affected outside of the function you called. Without that, n would only be ++ inside this function here. Does that make sense? Again, this is not something you need to do that often, to be honest. I'd even forgot the syntax because it's so long since I've done that bit. Normally, what you would do is you can, because the language is very flexible, you can normally return values, so you could just bolt it onto the return, but you can only have one return value. All right, cool. So let's have a little look at. Let's have a look at the other thing that I did earlier, which was. Yeah, let's have a look at lists. Oh, should I go there? Should I go there? Yeah, let's go there. Let's go there. I'm going to make this static. Now, as we know, static means that this isn't going to have access to these, but in terms of it will be able to access private variables, but it won't be able to see these on an because it's not an instance of a class. It won't be able to do a one-to-one like we did in there where I went Martin.getAge. Let's put that back in now. What I'm going to do here is debug, or I'm sorry, I'm going to print a list of people. I'm going to pass a bunch of people into here, and we'll do a little loop. And to keep things simple, because I don't want to go into string interpolation yet, we'll do there's better ways of doing this, but I'm keeping it simple so I don't complicate things at the moment. I'm going to do show list, and I can now call this and I don't need an instance of the class, so I can do bitman oh no, hang on, class one more. What did I call it? Person. Right, it's moaning at me because it needs a list, so I'm going to create one. I don't know what the hell I pressed there. Right, so I've now created a list there. This is effectively like an array. Heads up, you got 20 minutes. You have to go. Oh, yeah, no problem, no problem. I'll probably be wrapping up soon anyway. It's been a long enough session. We'll finish off this thing. I'm going to talk about lists, and then we'll leave it at that. Right. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a list. This is effectively an array. I'm going to have an array of people, and I'm going to print them out in there. Now, what I did here, and we haven't removed them to loops or anything like that yet, but there is a particular type of loop in C# which goes through everything within that list. And they're pretty easy to use. These basically, it says for every item in that list, for every person. Okay, cool. I've just read that, what you're saying about arrays. Yeah, this should hopefully make things a little bit simpler. There are a number of different ways you can deal with arrays in C#. What you might be interested in actually is there was a chat in the Discord. In fact, let me show you it. I had this conversation in Discord earlier, which talks about a little bit about the differences of using arrays in C#. So this might be of interest to you as well. And if you go on there afterwards, if you still want more information, have a look in there. If you've got any questions, you can come back to me. So yeah, sorry for just to make that clear. What the hell is it doing there? Well, just to make that clear, you were looking under C#.net and then type to compare from C and C++. And if you've not done those languages, just look at the C# thing. Feel free to answer questions on that in that group there, in that thread. Right. So now what I've got is a list of persons. Now what's going to happen when I print that out? Well, not a right lot, because it's an empty list effectively. This is like I've not added anything to it. But let's change that. Actually, this might dovetail nicely for next time into constructors. Right. So now what I'm doing is I have 3 people to the list. I've created a new list, and I've created 3 people. But what's it going to print out when I come into here? When I come into here, I'm going to go show list. Well, I haven't changed any of them from the default value. It's going to go name Martin, age 53. I wish. It's gonna do that 3 times, right? It's gonna show me again and again. So what I can do in here is I can do. Actually, I can only do that with properties. Let's look. Let's do shoe size. I'm just going to change shoe size for now, because otherwise this will drag on a little bit. But I can change the properties in here. Let's change all the shoe size. I'll come back to why in another one why we can't do this. Well, we can't do this because they're private variables. What I really should have done is put them all behind a property. But I don't want to. It's going to go on too long if I do that. If I start looking at that now. right, whatever. And given that I've just changed those, let me add something that prints the shoe size out. Alright, now let's run that. We're going to stick a breakpoint here. Remove the other one, I'm not interested in that anymore for now. And let's roll with that. Press the right one. There's a problem somewhere. Have I made a typo? Where's that? No, program CS19. There's a typo somewhere. 1944. I probably just pressed this. It seems to be there, but I can't see. Invalid term slash. I don't know where it's got that from. Invalid expression term slash. I've not put the slash in there. No, I don't think it's in there. What's this? Hang on. What's that little thing there? No, that's okay. Oh, that was it. Yeah. There we go. Right, I made a typo there. All right, building now. So we're going to run that through the debugger. And now I'm going to build my list. As I said, because I haven't put these behind properties, all I'm going to be altering is the shoe size for now. We'll come more back onto properties next time. But this is effectively, and I can look at that list, this is effectively now going to be a list of people. So if I look at people, there, I've got person 0, he's got a shoe size of 12, his age is 53, and his name's Martin. And again, they've all picked up the default values, but I've overridden, oh well, not over, I won't use that terminology. I've changed, at construction time, the shoe size. So now if I run into my, I'm going to step into that function, which will be F11, I think, on this one. Yeah, F11. I'm going to step into it, and now you can see it's come over to here, and now I'm going to step over, and it's going to go for every person in that list. For each of those 3 elements, I've now got a variable called person, and it's going to print the name. Where's the output? There we go. You see it appearing in here. And then shoe size. And if I do it again, it's now pick the next one from the list. And that's it. And with it being C#, I don't have to worry about like cleaning up the heap or the memory that's been allocated. It just does it for itself for the most part. So yeah, that was a very. There are other types of arrays, as I say. We can come on to those at a later point. But lists are very easy to use. You just basically, this is what's called a generic, but basically you have a list and then you have whatever the type of that list is going to be. The generics are basically, what a generic means is that you have an algorithm, like a list or what's another option? A dictionary, for example, and you can use your own custom types. So person was the type that we defined. But now we can have a list that manages a list of people, a list of persons. So you can give it the specifics of the type that you're looking at. Generics is a bit more advanced than I want to go into right now. But to consume them, to use them, it's easy enough. You just go list, and then you put in like that, and then you put you put greater than or less than, and put the actual data type that you're interested in there. So hopefully that makes sense. That's probably a reasonable place to leave it for now. We can explore properties and arrays in a bit more detail next time, and maybe we should go more into some of the other data types, the data types and structures and that kind of thing. Is that okay, guys? Not sure what the delay is. I mean, as in what the lag is between me talking and it getting through to you. All right, cool. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a lot to absorb. Once you've been doing it for a while, it'll make a lot more sense. But you've got the video to refer to as well, so we'll probably leave it there for now. The video will obviously be up. It's nice in YouTube. I don't have to piss about and download it from Twitch and re-upload it again. So yeah, I think that's been a reasonable session. So thanks for popping by, guys, and perhaps see you next time. All right then. So yeah, I'm going to end the stream now. So thanks a lot, guys. I'm dropping it shortly. Right, stopping the stream now.